I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. My thanks to the Sounds of Blackness, my friend Gary Hines. A powerful message, a timely message. I think it reflects a feeling abroad in the community, in our community, and in society, and is particularly apropos. Given what's happening at the Capitol in our country and what may be happening in cities around the country. On Mondays, we connect with leaders in neighborhood organizations. I'm pleased to continue that today. My regular friend, Andrew Bornhoff, is here from Hawthorne Community Council in North Minneapolis. Alicia D. Smith is here. She represents the Corcoran neighborhood in South Minneapolis. Our friend Clarence Jones operates a project called the Human Project, or Partnership, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But he's going to be here next week to talk and give an in-depth report on important research they're doing. But I'm pleased to welcome for the first time from the Seward Neighborhood Group the new executive director, Sam Titel. And you can correct me if I'm pronouncing the name properly. Sam, how are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks. It's Sam Tatel, rhymes with dreidel. I'm also
Uh,
Ashkenazi.
well, now I know Sam Tatel. Okay, thank you for being here. And this is informal, conversational. One of the things that I wanted to do when Alicia told me that you were new to the organization was to invite you just to meet you, introduce you to our listenership and to our readership, and to make sure that you were aware that this is a resource and asset, a platform that can support you, your vision, and your work. So I want to start off by saying that. I also want to start off by acknowledging and referring to you as Sensei Sam. One of the things I read in your bio was that you are a third degree black belt with 21 years of training in Aikido. And I'm still a beginner in Aikido, but I have mad respect for this form and for the study of it. And so I'm so pleased to meet you, and I bow to you as a sensei. So, introduce yourself if you would, and your work and how you came to Twin Cities to join the Seward organization.
Yeah, thank you. Just Sam is fine. I'm learning and reveling in all the knowledge and just connections that I've been making in the Twin Cities. Meeting Alicia was just, it made my heart sing the first time I met her in person. And that was really touching. Hopefully soon, safely again, without masks, with vaccines. I came to Minneapolis really unexpectedly. I never thought I would end up in the Midwest personally. I've always been more attracted to the coasts. I grew up in North Jersey and then was in New York City for an internship, a martial arts internship, college, and then work at the Museum of Natural History as a program coordinator. And then coming out here, I moved because I needed a change. I was getting really exhausted in New York City. And so I decided to pick up and leave and come with my partner to Minneapolis. And then I was a specialized program teacher, was taken up over the summer as well, and wanted to be more involved with the community and build connections that way. And the Seward Neighborhood Group, I saw this posting, this opening, and I thought it would just be a beautiful connection and collaboration with the community that I want to help strengthen and be a part of. So it was the perfect timing.
And so, what have you learned about Seward so far? I know that you're new to the community. What are you learning and discovering? This has got to be, not in depth, I know, but what's your first impressions of the community?
Yeah, I just celebrated my 2-year anniversary in Minneapolis. I was previously in Whittier. Now I live in Seward as well. I mean, first, there's a lot of cheese that I'm not used to, the dairy content here, but Seward, I just love how active the community members are, and especially the businesses. There are so many resources right here in our neighborhood. And I know I'm a bit spoiled because I can just walk to Franklin. And that's really special for me. And our offices are right on Franklin, but truly the engagement in community. And I love the amount of signs that are out on everyone's lawns. It's just, it feels like a very engaged neighborhood. And I'm happy to be here as well.
And so South Minneapolis and Seward in particular are historically activist communities. Uh, this show really emanated from a weekly program on KFAI, which is down the street in the Cedar Riverside area, but Seward is part of its immediate footprint. And I know Seward has always produced a set of activists and neighborhood leaders and committed people. So I think you are exactly right in describing this commitment to engagement by the residents of the community. And it's a university affiliated community as well. And it's a diverse community. What do you see as the kind of the vibe or the vision aims of the community? You've described that it's surprising because there's so much business involvement. Where does that head? Where does it lead? And what do you want it to do as the director of the Seward Neighborhood Group?
Mhm. Yeah, I think in that I talked about building connections, and what I see is a lot of diversity, but not as many connections over the like diverse population that we have in Seward.
Mm-hmm.
And the businesses as well are I feel are quite divided. And I want more communication and collaboration between like a ton of Somali businesses that are here and also on Franklin, and as well as like just a lot of white owned businesses too, and really strength in what's the networking that is established, but bringing more people into that network. So I hope to spider out rather than just having pockets of strength in organizing. I really want to help folks connect and be a liaison in that way between all these wonderful and diverse communities we have.
Tell me more about your background, as much as you're comfortable. From New Jersey, but raised in New York, right? Uh,
Yeah, raised in New Jersey,
Raised in
in
New
North
Jersey.
Jersey.
Okay.
I personally am mixed. I identify as Black. My mom is white, Jewish, Ashkenazi. My dad's Black. And yeah, I grew up in North Jersey in the suburbs. Thinking of Minneapolis, it feels like a suburb to me coming from New York City. People have yards. And so that to me is a suburb. I know I'm wrong. I've been told multiple times. But really just appreciating the greenery here as well, because it's very different from my life in New York City. What other history, I guess, of me?
So I'll have some fun now. When Sam was 5, how did the world look to you then? What kind of what were you growing up into as you started school, and what kind of hopes and dreams were you developing, and how have those dreams kind of become focused through grade school and through high school and college and martial arts? What are the things that brought you to the world view that you have now and to the kind of person that you are right now? What formed your view and your passion for being here right now?
Yeah,
Big question.
of course.
And
And my first
have fun with it. Have fun with it.
yeah, my first thought was, oh, when I was 5, I was rolling around on the tatami, which are mats that martial arts practitioners train on, literally rolling around doing rolls, giggling when my mom threw people. And my first memory of school, though, was probably being from preschool released into this yard where parents would come collect their kids at the end of the day, and everyone running out and me being held back, and I didn't know why. And I said, hey, my mom is right there. And it was this little enclosed area. And the assistant, the aide said, no, your mom's not here. Like, no, but she is right there. I see her. And I've gone back and processed that memory a lot, and just, did she just assume my family wasn't there because she was looking for someone Black?
Mm-hmm.
And I was signaled out in that preschool when I wasn't believed, when I said to the person, my mom is right there.
Mm-hmm.
I know who my mom is. And so I think noticing my Blackness and how I'm perceived and move through the world has always been really, really curious for me, because I was made aware of it at a very young age. And while I moved through primarily really white and privileged spaces, I noticed the social and cultural gymnastics that I did all the time. And that was tiring. So I continually just tried to make these connections where even if I noticed what was happening, I tried to bring people in and help them maybe notice and push boundaries of just how much can I push and still call in folks. I want them to interact with me, to be interested, and see me for who I am, not a token or exemplar, but someone to actually connect and engage with. And so I think my entire life has been really, the foundation is my identity as a mixed individual and how we are just very liminal in the world. And that's been a lot of pain, but also a lot of resources. I can, as I said, move through spaces and connect with many folks. And that's what I'm focusing on, the strength of that.
And so, as you grew through grade school and high school,
Mhm.
the question of identity, how did it impact or shape what you did and what you wanted to do and what you were able to do?
Yeah. I wanted to be a marine biologist, of a small team of people and in the ocean with amazing animals, cool trips. But I I just could never not be fascinated by people. So I ended up studying cultural anthropology and sociolinguistics because this question of what do people do and why do they do it? Um, I still don't understand and I'm still working on and processing. So in grade school, I was always a really, really good student. And then in high school, I went into this program academy that was really difficult for me because I'd never been pushed in school before. And I was told I couldn't do a lot of things, even by other parents in the program. They didn't expect me to be there. I was the first Black individual ever in the academy. And so just being questioned why I was at events that were invite only for the academy, and uh, then being harped on by a counselor for deferring from NYU because
Mm-hmm.
I would mess up her statistics. And yeah, just repeatedly what I thought was really ridiculous, but obviously harmful, really harmful at the time, of what I couldn't do or what I could do, but only because I was Black. I could be accepted into the space because I was bringing that token item. And as I mentioned, this continued through college, and a great personal resource for me was my Aikido practice because, and that's a whole nother thing. I'm moving through white privileged spaces. This is a very traditional Japanese martial art.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about a whole nother culture to figure out and interact with, and not try to impersonate or appropriate, but truly to celebrate the art and train and grow from that as well. And Aikido is a lot about not just not blending. It's not about creating this false harmony, I would say, of pushing everything out that is conflict. And so therefore you have harmony in this one space. Rather, it's embracing that conflict and seeing what you can do to just make it not a conflict. It's about all that embracing rather than excluding things that are inconvenient. And that's been a tenet for my life and continues to be, especially now in Seward as well.
You mentioned that when you were 5, you were rolling around on mats. Were your parents martial artists? How did
Yeah,
you, which one, both or one or the other?
they met in college at a Taekwondo club. And then my mom practices Aikido still and has a dojo in New Jersey as well.
Uh,
Both, I come from a really active family.
Well, that's wonderful. That's amazing. I want to, I have grandkids that I'd like to make sure that as early as they can, they start some form of martial arts, either Aikido or karate or any of the forms. But I think it's so important for self-discovery, for discipline, and just for the exercise, and also the camaraderie, the
Mhm.
friendship, and the community that you create in that sport, that training. But that probably applies to all kinds of training. But I think it's so wonderful. Um, Let me bring in Alicia and Andrew, and I want to have this conversation reflect on what you feel, Andrew and Alicia, remain the major challenges right now for community organizing and things that I'm sure Sam will be moving into. And part of the question, Alicia, has always been sustainability. How will these organizations get funding and keep funding, both from existing sources like the city, or will they need to develop alternate streams of revenue to continue programming in the future? Any thoughts or feelings, Alicia?
First, let me say thanks, Sam, for sharing more details about yourself and really just letting folks get to know you. Like Sam and I met in Target in the reopening of the Target, and so it was such a blessing that we were there at that time to connect and really build from here. And so I'm looking forward to supporting her and her efforts and also in her work, which is really important. And in particular, just being a Black woman embodied as an executive director over a neighborhood organization, which these roles have not historically been led by people that look like us. And so in that comes a lot of different challenges that are different than our white counterparts. And so, I would start there, but Mr. McFarlane, as always, you are right on point and on key with the reality of that neighborhood organizations are sort of fading at a time right now when the word community is the ultimate, like most important thing that we're finding out about ourselves, right? Culturally speaking, at least growing up for me and my traditions in the Black community, neighborhood organizations have been important and a pillar in terms of development and knowing where you can go for resources or to settle or to just bring in a group of people from maybe 5, 6 different block radius. And so I think where we find ourselves with the neighborhood groups in Minneapolis, the 76 of us, is with our funding only being through July of this year. We're on this sort of 6-month funding, and a lot of those funding being cut from the city's perspective. We have to get creative to sustain the work that we're doing. Right now, we are in a crisis. We're in a global crisis, right? And so when you think about what we've been collectively experiencing in terms of just trauma on top of trauma. And then we're still battling COVID and the implications of COVID and what it has done to many of our families, leaving folks unemployed, underemployed, on again, off again of work, and taking away some of their very basic essential needs, where you have housing in jeopardy for lots of folks. You have the affordability of being able to afford to even go to work when you have people choosing between, am I going to feed my family or will I use this $25 or $30 to fill up my gas tank to go to work? That is where we are as a community. And those are where our neighborhood organizations have been critical, in particular since February here in Minneapolis, right? Like, as you know, we've talked about it before, we operate a small food and resource life center out of our office here at the corporate neighborhood. And we're not seeing a decrease in attendance for folks that are utilizing the services. We have seen a dramatic increase in that. And it isn't getting the traffic through the doors isn't slowing down. And so that we know that collectively we are struggling as a community. And that's something for us to be able to lean in with one another and say, okay, where folks are maybe feeling disconnected in terms of public safety or feeling like they're overwhelmed with lawlessness, they're not calling City Hall. They're calling their neighborhood executive director, their neighborhood organization office and saying, what the heck is going on? Another car window got broken out, or someone broke into my house, someone broke into my car. I feel unsafe. I feel overwhelmed. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I need resources. I don't have food. Where do I get health insurance? Can I go see a doctor? What do I do with my kids? I'm struggling. The internet isn't working. And so they're reaching out to neighborhood organizations to figure out where those resources are. And we sort of act like a hub for this sort of bicycle wheel and try to bridge out all of those spokes. And so it's super important that we figure out creative ways to fund the work that we do. And it's really important work. It isn't social services that we're necessarily offering folks. It's really like about the human connection. It's about the 500 people I see a week that come and visit this Food and Life Resource Center. It's about connecting with the elders in my neighborhood saying, hey, I'm a little bit scared to just walk my dog now. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I call the police, or I'm scared to call the police. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong. And so how do we begin to bridge community in the sense of getting back to this notion and the reality that many of us have grew up in terms of it takes a village, and we have become the village. And it is so important that we're not only raising children, but we're taking care of one another.
Andrew, how's it look from North Minneapolis? And I see Diana is here as well. You and Diana join in, and I'm concerned about creating awareness in the community about the challenge of funding for the neighborhood organizations such as Hawthorne and Jordan, Cleveland, Corcoran, Seward, etc. How does it look? She said 30 days or 6 months, right? Where do we go? How do we maintain the organizations? Hey, Diana.
For us, one thing I brought up at the Neighborhood 2020 meetings is a lot of the wealthier neighborhoods in this community have people on their boards who know how to fundraise already, or know how to take advantage of the system that was designed by them for them. And so they don't necessarily see or face the same issues that we do. As well as on the north side, like Alicia was saying, community organizations, neighborhood organizations serve as a hub. We are a source that a lot of people go to, honestly, because we're one of the last places they trust. They don't trust their council members. They don't trust the city. And honestly, there are a lot of nonprofits they don't trust either, because they don't feel like they ever received the respect they deserved. And so for us, a lot of times it can be, we're the filter, we're the vetting service for them. And I know other neighborhood orgs feel the same way. We feel like we're doing the city's work for free, or for not what we deserve. Not that we deserve anything, we're just trying to take care of our community. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that we struggle with too is we are a community that just has one thing put on it on top of another, on top of another. And then we ask people, hey, could you join the board? Hey, could you join the housing committee? Could you join the planning committee? Could you join the environmental? People don't have time for this. And so we want to have a neighborhood organization that represents the community, but oftentimes our community doesn't have time to take on the problems of the community. If that makes sense. It's very difficult. And then we hear feedback from the city saying, well, why don't you have a full board? Or what's going on? Why aren't you getting its participation? So for us, it's just kind of a catch-22 of impossible tasks. We're working hard. We want our community to succeed.
Kind of froze up. Is anybody else frozen, or just Andrew? Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, Andrew, guess your bandwidth got frozen up on us. Jump in, Diana. Tell Andrew.
I was just going to piggyback, a lot of what Andrew is saying. This is why we have now started to work on other things, Alicia, whereas after July, we're not going to try to depend on the city's funding. We have built a relationship with the University of Minnesota and Clarence with He-Man. We have built a relationship with the city, but we got to keep in mind that there's a lot of other agencies that after July, they're not going to have any money, whereas some of us will have our NRP dollars to fall back on.
Yeah.
And if you have more than 2 staff people, you're really going to be in trouble because the CPP will go away. You see where I'm coming from? So right now, we as executive directors, we need to put our heads together and figure out how we use our NRP dollars wisely. At the same time, we need to reach out to the community because we got these evictions that's getting ready to come up and people are going to need housing.
Yes.
That's where we're leaning towards right now, is this housing, because it's going to get bad. In addition to that, we still have to deal with the opiates that's coming within the new virus now. because a lot of it is going to the people that are on drugs. They are getting this virus. So we got to deal with this. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So, so thank you, Diana, for doing that. Clarence Jones is on the call, just sort of monitoring. But Clarence, we mentioned that you run the Human Partnership, and you've done some marvelous research on the impact of opioids, right, in our community. I know you're going to be presenting next week, but give us a little bit, a snapshot of the nature of the work that you've done with the Human Project.
Thank you, Al, for the opportunity to do this, and I'm really pleased to have the chance to kind of speak here. And actually, I don't run Human. I think the community runs Human. We try to make it like that. But the reality is this: is that you're absolutely correct. Human is really trying to figure out how do we work with the community to tell the community's narrative to the funders, to the researchers, to the academic world, and also to ourselves to understand what our strengths and our assets are. We are definitely looking at some of these issues and looking for you as neighborhoods to be able to direct and to guide us in this process. I will tell you this: as a result of our work in the community, we're getting some really great opportunities, and we're not keeping those opportunities for Human. We're giving them back to the community. And so one of the things I tell people all the time is that the Human Partnership, while we're made up of a variety of different kind of organizations, we are not trying to get, we're not trying to do projects. What we're trying to do is to have the community's narrative told in a way in which they will be heard. And part of what we'll do next week is to show you how, by collecting the community's narrative, we're able to tell the story. But Human doesn't tell the story. You'll tell the story in terms of what's going on. And I think that's what's beautiful about it. Sometimes it's hard to explain us, but the reality is once you get, somebody said one time, once you get to know us, you'll love us. Our goal really is authentic relationships. Bottom line, no games, no lies, and honesty. And I think that's what I've always wanted. Al, I've known you for a long time, and I think that you've known I've worked in the community for a long time. This is probably the best I've ever felt about working with my community. I'm just telling you honest truth. I think that we're finally getting some real folk who's giving us some real information, real feedback, and I think that we have some real partners who want to help. And now we have to have you tell the story. So, yeah, that's.
Anthropologist, right? Or you cultural anthropology? Did you say, Sam? That was one of your areas of interest?
Yeah, sociolinguistics
Social
and cultural anthropology. And
So talk about storytelling and narratives, what it means for a community from your study, but also from your experience. Clarence opened the door for this. How does it resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, what he said about authentic relationships is the base of getting your story out there and representation. And it makes a big difference, right? Who you see where. Alicia also named that many Black women have not occupied executive director roles. And so how are our stories getting out there as well? And now that we are in this role, we can connect with other folks, other Black women, especially to bring the story to the forefront, not just for them, which is really important and not empowering. They're already powerful, but to like show that power to the world and everyone else, and let more people connect with them. Because if, right, I don't know, a janitor their story isn't being told in like the appropriate light or their actual words, it's the role of the neighborhood group I'm seeing to really bring everyone's narrative on an equal playing field, equal platform, is what I see the neighborhood group as doing. And it's not to elevate one above the other. It's truly to build that authentic relationship, because as Andrew said too, if there's not trust, you're not getting an authentic or true narrative. So the base level, before even that narrative is shared, you have to be trusted as an individual and organization to have your narrative like shared and carried. And these connections, right, they start small, they build, and it takes time. So we were feeling all this pressure and immediacy, especially with funding. And I coming in, learning the funding, I have to learn NRP, the previous funding, CPP, the current funding, which is ending, and the future funding. So I don't know, I chose the wrong time in that way. But knowing that there is a future because we are connected to community and that will just continue to build, I feel is really heartening. And I want to hear the narrative of the community, all of it.
Al, that's it, something real quick.
Please.
Okay. I love these kind of meetings because as you're talking, you know,
bring your camera down a little bit, Clarence, because
okay.
You got, yeah.
You can see me a little bit better?
Yeah, or scoot into your camera.
Okay. All right. As a community health strategist, I love listening to people because I'm on both sides of the story. And one of the things that we wanted to do, and I think I talked to Diane and Andrew about this, is that we want to do a photo voice of communities. And I would love to do one for neighborhoods. I think that that's something. So as you're talking, I'm listening, and there are things that we've already started looking at or planning, and we would just love to have your participation in those things. So that's why I say it's just good to be here. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for that idea. And I want to thank you, Clarence, for sort of reaffirming the sense of stability, even in an environment of unsteadiness, that there is a tumultuous and chaotic environment, certainly in the news world and in the political arena right now. But what you have articulated, I think, is foundational. And what you've said that I'm hearing and receiving is that right now, this is the best. It's kind of like the worst of times and the best of times, right? This is the best because you're seeing our community reveal itself to itself in a way that reflects the power that it has and our appreciation and exercise of that power in our own agency. That we now have come to a point where we have more confidence and more capability and more willingness to both assert and provide assurance about the sanctity of our existence and about our both responsibility and our right to be at the table of decision in community. And what I'm hearing you, Sam, and Diana and Alicia say is that this is about democratizing. I think you said it's not that we elevate interests where it's one above the other or neighborhoods one above the other, but we create collaborations where we all win. And I think that's where we are. And that was certainly the purpose, Alicia, and me asking you and Diana and all the other colleagues to get together as often as we could on Mondays just to share stories and attitudes and strategies. I personally am so impressed by you all as Black women, and I'm, in my mind, here to support and applaud your strength and your wisdom and your fierceness, because I think that you are providing a leadership in community that is absolutely essential. And so my job is to be a platform, to elevate your voice and to affirm and confirm the righteousness of your approach. And to challenge you when you're wrong at the same time, right? That's what we do for each other. That's being real, I think, Clarence. So let me ask you all to put the discussions we're having now into the current topics of the day. How do we deal with COVID-19? What's not so much how we deal with it. We know we got to get tested. We got to do the protocols, and we got to get to vaccines if that's what we believe. But how is COVID-19, the pandemic, reshaping what we do and what we can do? What do you think? I'll start with you, Diana. What does it mean for us as a people and as a community organization?
Well, we kind of need to really learn how to do things different because we're going to be virtual for a while. I mean, there's 2 new strands out here, this mess. So I think people really need to learn how to accept the fact that This is how we're going to be. Because my biggest concerns are our babies in their education right now. Are they getting what they need? If we put them back in school, are we putting them in danger? So that's my biggest concern. The same way with our elderlies. You know, our elderlies have to get out and get medicine and that kind of stuff. And a lot of times they can't get to these places. So how do we help them? So that's kind of where I'm at in this pandemic, because we have to learn how to accept things are different. This is a new way of life, and it's going to change for everybody.
So that's part one. Part two is the pandemic of 1619. I think that the pandemic of COVID-19 has simply also shown through to structural and historic trauma and challenges that we've always dealt with, but we have to deal with differently now. And when I speak about fierceness in Black women, I'm speaking about fierceness in our people and our capacity to say exactly what we mean, to mean what we say, no matter who we're talking to. And that's said in the acknowledgement that in the past, there have been times where we couldn't speak our truth. But to speak our truth meant death, right? But I think we're at a different place now. So COVID-19, 1619, the question of justice. Where are we now in that sense in our community?
I think we have come, with regards to just that time frame, I think we have come a long way, because like you said, back then we had slaves and they weren't speaking up. And I'm gonna be honest, there are still slaves right now that won't speak up. But we as African-American people, we need to speak our mind. Not just the Black people, you got Latinos, you got Asians, we have all cultures that need to be speaking up right now, because we all have been through some mental trauma. And I say mental trauma because I look back at what just happened at the Capitol. That was mental trauma. And I'm telling you, our babies are asking why. So yeah, this is some real mental trauma. Just like you said, people are turning to alcohol, they're turning to pills, they're turning to drugs. They don't know how to deal with it. So we got to come together and help these people, because the trauma is real. It's real, real. I've heard a couple people commit suicide now behind this. This is crazy.
Alicia, what are your thoughts? And I'll start the opposite way. Talk about how the sense of what we're watching at the Capitol, the question of the inauguration, the effort to deny the Biden-Harris team the authorization that Congress was seeking to give them, the despicable actions of the President of the United States and a number of political leaders, and obviously a lot of white nationalist groups that assaulted the Capitol. Talk about that first, and then put that in the context of the pandemic of 1619, and that in the context of COVID-19. How do all these things change what you do and how you do it, what you can do, what you must do? What do you think?
I think that's a lot. And we spent a lot of time talking about it. So I'm excited to start the conversation. But I think that all of these things are interconnected, right? When we start, like even at 1619 to COVID-19, right? Like, I don't know if you just put those words together or if you thought long about the parallel there of the language, but what we seen, what we can go back and read from history and what we see today, the eeriness of where we are now and where we were then. The difference in now and now versus then is that we have a voice, right? And there's a certain level of humility that has come out of all of these tragic and intentional forms of hurt that have been inflicted on certain groups of people. And now, since we are collectively experiencing COVID-19, because COVID-19 is coming whether you have $1 billion or you have no dollars, whether you're housed or unhoused, it's coming for you. It has not discriminated in terms of who it affects. Now, who it's killing certainly has been impacted on our community much more deadlier than others. but that also speaks to the systemic suffering and injustices that we experience with our healthcare system, and so on and so forth. And so when I think about these things in context to what we witnessed last week on television for many of us, was certainly not shocking nor surprising. But really, if you go back and you look at the history of this president and who he is and has been, he certainly has been himself during his entire time in the White House. And so what he has shown us is that at the last minute, where people were sort of banking on this sort of quiet exit strategy, essentially, if you had watched this guy from early in his career to now, you certainly knew there was something up his sleeve that he had yet to pull off. And so you were expecting mayhem. The problem that I think many of us who are watching it has is that there was a sort of very lackadaisical response to the violence that arrived and the access of the privilege that extended itself to say that you could even get close enough. They telegraphed this sort of they telegraphed their moves for all of us to see. We all knew that they were going there, but somehow the system was the only one that didn't know that this was going to happen and allowed for people, multiple people, to be killed and die as a result, and people to be hurt, while you have people who are literally protesting and asking in a very democratic way to be treated like human beings, right? We have people that are just saying, treat me like a human, not treat me better than anyone else, but just acknowledge the fact that I too bleed red blood like you. And then you have folks who are saying, well, you don't deserve to lead this country. So instead of going with what we consider one of the greatest things about American society is this democratic process, we are going to overturn and burn this thing down so you can't pull the records to see that this transition needs to happen. And so I think that in this, it speaks to the resiliency for us as a people to always have to show up with that resilient factor, like we survive. And we're trying to get to a place as a people from surviving to living. And there's a difference in how you live in both those worlds. You survive because it's either that or death. When you live, you get to enjoy the moments along the way. And you don't assume that I'm going to die in every single interaction that you have with the outside world. And so I think that it speaks to our resiliency factor, but then it also has wakened our sort of majority brothers and sisters up to say, wait a second, now that I can see it with my own two eyes in black and white or in color, whatever, the disparities that exist and the double standards, it has certainly created great opportunity for dialogue and some magnificent changes to come about.
Sam, jump in. You can take it any way you want to handle that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for both COVID and our governance, just the disparity in representation and risk is what keeps screaming out at me, because with COVID, I mean, it's still, people's risks are not the same. There's essential workers who do have to choose between travel or food. So working to get more money to pay for that food or the food in the immediate today. And other people aren't having to make those decisions. And then that's even before it gets to healthcare. And the disparity in governance is, you're still needing to represent the whole people. And I feel like on a, I guess micro level, neighborhood groups are similar in what is being decided to be done, because you want to be focused enough to have an initiative that reaches people and yet not crippled by something very broad that has to like be perfect and affect everyone. Every target has to be checked. And so right now, I think we are truly in a junction, and neither of them is going to be solved quickly. Maybe, right, COVID reasonably first, because the vaccine is going to come out. There's a new, more contagious strain, but also the scale of time for COVID-19 is just so much shorter than the centuries that the United States of America has existed. And it did come into creation, right? The land was here, but it came into creation, the United States of America. Mm-hmm. And truly, I think, as Alicia said as well, the majority is seeing threads that have been uncovered, that have been present for a long time, not just present, but foundational elements of America. And neighborhood groups, I worry because there is that question of funding and where it's coming from, and needing to be that resource when what resource are we drawing from? What trove are we providing our community with? And it goes back to mutual aid, right? A neighborhood group, I see, needs the community to survive, and also the community needs the neighborhood group to survive. So this give and take, I want to see develop more, rather than just relying on the city, because that's a larger ecosystem than any of us exist in. And the neighborhood groups can come together to create this beautiful collaboration, but also our strength is that we're hyper local. Mm-hmm. And there is power in the collective and the majority. And also, I want to be able to walk and drop off food to my neighbor. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying not to be doom and gloom of both these pandemics are very present and close to heart and draining. And also, like, I know we're making progress. We are not where we were before. And I think a neighborhood group has a large part in the morale of everyone around us too.
I want to close with this. One of the things that I would suggest we look at in the neighborhood level is what role we can play in promoting, if we feel this is appropriate, vaccinations in our neighborhoods. The challenges that the infrastructure for delivery, even going to CVS's and to Walgreens, is still too narrow. And are there community centers? I was telling somebody, the Urban League building has not been fully used of late because of COVID-19, but could buildings like the Urban League and like UROC, like Sabathani, and like some of the schools that are vacant, be turned into places where lots, like hundreds, and thousands of people could get the vaccinations if they want to? And I think that the thinking in the new administration is to get as many vaccines or vaccinations out as possible. Is there a role that neighborhood organizations can play in identifying places and processes that can expand how much protection, vaccination can be delivered in our neighborhood? And because you are hyper local, you have the ability, and because you are trusted, you have the ability to motivate and connect and support individuals in their homes and apartments. So that's just one thought. I want to close with just the idea that I'm concerned that the pressure that is coming up right now in the next several days is not over. What we happened last week is not over. I got an email from a friend a couple of hours ago where this email is kind of floating around, I think, but I want to share a little of it with you. And it's just a person that had a connection in government telling people to really pay attention, be safe, because let's see. The note just talked about planned protests today, for example, in Olympia, Washington, on the 16th in Washington, D.C., on the 17th in all 54 capitals of states and territories, on the 18th in Richmond, Virginia, 19th through 20. The chatter on the internet is about violent events. So I say that to say we simply have to pay attention. We don't want to fuel anxiety or fuel despair, but we have to tell ourselves to pay attention, just to be aware and to be calm and to be mindful of our space and to look out for each other, to be caring of our families and our neighborhoods. And I think beyond that, as Clarence said, operate in the belief that we really are despite this, despite the challenges, we're in a good place to move towards the transformation that we seek in building a community that honors and respects every human being. Well, listen, guys, thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much, Alicia, Diana, Sam. So good to meet you, Clarence Jones. Thank you for being here. See you next week. I'm Al McFarlane, and if you like this conversation, join us every week here on Mondays at 1 o'clock. We do this every day, actually. So tomorrow, another program. We want to hear from you, and we thank you for participating, for doing what you do to make our community